Addressed by Governor Sam Brownback, coming to us courtesy of KPTS TV.
Thank you all. Mr. Speaker, Madam President, legislators, elected officials, cabinet members, leaders of Kansas sovereign Native American tribes and nation that are here, Lieutenant Governor Jeff Collier and his wife Ruth. Please also welcome for me, if you would, my wife, the First Lady of Kansas, Mary Brownback. Good to have you here. Thank you. Thanks, son. My fellow Kansans, one person I want to recognize in particular this evening because he's one of the new people in the front four in leadership, and that's Tom Burris, the House Minority Leader. Tom, congratulations on the new position and in leadership. Good to see you. I saw him just before I was going down the world's tallest water slide that I think is in your district, or at least it's close. And it's a great place. Good evening and welcome back. Delighted to have all of you here. Before I begin the State of the State message in earnest, I want to pay tribute to the men and women of our armed forces. The strength of Kansas is best represented, I think, by those who risk their lives to protect us. Major General Paul Funk from Fort Riley is currently leading the fight against ISIS. He's in charge and leading that fight right now. From Fort Riley, he's in Iraq, so obviously he's not here with us tonight, but instead we wanted to have here and recognize all the brave Kansans who serve through the presence of Brigadier General Eric Wesley and Command Sergeant Major Maurice Jackson, both of Fort Riley. Gentlemen, would you please stand so that we could recognize and honor you? Thank you. We are so proud of the military in our state and what you do to keep us free and safe. Now, I'm informed by the clerks that of the 165 current members of the legislature, About 100 of them are new to this body since 2010. Now, that's to say, many of you have never had the opportunity as legislators to hear from another governor other than me. And for that, I don't apologize. But I will try to keep the speech short, concise, and to the point. Throughout my career in public service, I've been driven by the belief that government exists to serve the people. Those who lead, those who govern, must do so with courage and compassion. And in that way, we serve those best that our folks can live in freedom and dignity. That belief continues to guide my actions today, as it did 4 years ago when I gave my first State of the State message. At that time, we gathered to address the challenges confronting our state, the two biggest of which were the economy and the budget. On that January night 4 years ago, more than 100,000 Kansans were actively looking for work, and they couldn't find it. Kansas ranked near the bottom among U.S. states in private sector job growth. Personal income was low, and poverty was headed up. From 1999 to 2009, the number of Kansans in private sector employment had actually dropped in our state, while state general fund spending had grown by a third. In fiscal year 2010, for the first and only time in Kansas history, the state general fund ended the fiscal year in a negative status. Our economic and fiscal course was clearly unsustainable. It was time for change. From this podium, I announced that the days of ever-expanding government were over, and we went to work. We reformed state government to better serve Kansans by eliminating, consolidating, or privatizing multiple state agencies and redundant functions, and reducing the public sector workforce by more than 3,000 positions. We embarked on a budgetary course that saw state general fund expenditure grow at a lower rate than each of the previous 9 governors, while continuing to support core government functions in serving Kansans. With bipartisan support, we overhauled our state's economic development strategy, established rural opportunity zones, and strengthened CAPERS. 4 years later, I submit these facts for your review. Kansas has created more than 59,000 new private sector jobs. Our unemployment rate is tied for 10th lowest in the nation. And best yet, more Kansans are working than ever in the history of our state. Personal income is rising. We are addressing the causes of poverty, and welfare rolls have been cut in half. Thanks to the efforts of our teachers and parents, Kansas students' test scores are among the best in the country. Record numbers of Kansans are enrolled in technical education, and our institutions of higher education are global leaders in fields such as animal health and aeronautics and the universal fight against cancer. So, Mr. Speaker and Madam President, it is for these reasons and more that I can report to you tonight that Kansas is on the rise and the state of our state is strong. Thank you. Now, as we've always known as Kansans, great achievements require hard work. It requires the courage to face our challenges head-on and find solutions that work for Kansans. The goal of the Department of Children and Families is to be the agency of opportunity, helping Kansans move from poverty to prosperity. One of our great successes has been the number of people who have left public assistance and found work. We have seen more than a 50% decline in TANF recipients in the last 4 years. Instead of welfare, we want Kansans to enjoy the dignity of work and build a better life for themselves and their families, and this is to be celebrated. Valerie Cahill is here with us tonight, single mother who is on public assistance. With the help of our employment and training program, Valerie is now earning full-time wages in the medical industry and is off welfare assistance. Valerie and her son Cortez are here tonight with us. Cortez is a junior in high school and wants to join the Marines. Valerie, would you and your son please stand so that we could recognize your courage and perseverance in moving forward? The Army general here wants to get him in the Army instead of the Marines, so we've got a competition for Cortez. We will continue to move forward, helping people move from dependence on the government to independence. We will be putting forward programs that require more able-bodied welfare recipients to apply for work or work training as a condition of receiving the welfare benefit. One of the key ways out of poverty and despair is through work that brings hope and a path forward. To move forward, we need all of Kansas growing. This includes our urban cores that in too many cases have seen their problems multiply and their solutions divide. In the first term, we implemented rural opportunity zones that this legislature passed, and it has been a success. 77 counties have embraced it with more than 2,000 applicants received to date, and more than a quarter of those from out of state. People are coming to Kansas for opportunity and for growth. It is time to take this same successful concept to our urban core, and I'm proposing that we provide the same growth tools to high-poverty areas in Kansas City, Wichita, and Topeka. The same requirements for local participation will exist as well. This will help more Kansans succeed and will draw more people to our state. Now, even as we celebrate our successes, we must acknowledge that the most recent data regarding state government revenue and expenditures presents a clear challenge that must be addressed. For the past several weeks, we've been in consultation with government, business, and industry leaders regarding our shared fiscal concerns. They have been generous with their time and frank with their advice. Tomorrow, I will present to this legislature a proposed 2-year budget that will be in balance, with revenues exceeding expenditures each of those fiscal years. And we will continue our march to zero income taxes. We will do this because the states with no income tax consistently grow faster than those with high income taxes. Now, there may be some who consider this course too bold. Well, I'm the sort of guy who would have sent Alex Gordon from third base. Getting our income taxes to zero represents our best opportunity. It represents our best opportunity for long-term growth. Now, I propose this budget as a starting point in your deliberations. I understand and appreciate fully that the power of the purse is yours and does not belong to any other branch of government. We're good with that one. That's in the Constitution. In my travels around Kansas, I found what I expect most of you have during your visits with the people we serve. I love Kansas and I love Kansans. Kansans are sensible, they're decent, they're compassionate people, they're thoughtful. They prize liberty, they celebrate achievement, and they recognize a shared responsibility. They want government to focus on its core functions, to perform them well, to provide quality services, good schools, good roads, low taxes. Kansans understand the importance of living within our means and meeting our obligations. Kansans know the importance of a promise, whether to friends, family, or business. And recognizing that promise, they pay their debts on time and in full. The Kansas Constitution should reflect that as well. I'm proposing the legislature pass a constitutional amendment and put it before the Kansas voters, stating that the debt of the state is a general obligation of the state, and we will pay it first. This is good policy for our state. Those who make state policy in the people's name have to make tough choices. Those who refuse don't lead. Everyone will be able to find things in this budget that they don't agree with or they don't like. I hope as you review the budget, you put forth what you would do to make it better. But as we go about this work, I'd ask you to keep two things in mind. First, the family budget is more powerful than the government budget. And second, a growing economy that is adding private sector jobs and increasing personal income can fix a government budget. Conversely, a growing government budget cannot bring lasting prosperity to its citizens by appropriating ever more of their earnings. If we could spend our way to paradise, we would already be there. I found this amazing. It took 40 governors of Kansas to get to our first $1 billion level government fund expenditure. So it's 40 governors before we ever reached $1 billion in general fund expenditures. The next 4 governors saw that number hit $6 billion. That government spending growth was not reflective of the trajectory of our population or of our economy. It was government getting too big, too fast, taking too much of your money. The era of ever-expanding government is over because it has to be. Now, the major drivers in state spending increases are what you think they are. It's K-12 education, public pensions, Medicaid. Over the past several years, in addition to providing medical care in war zones around the world, Lieutenant Governor Collier has led our efforts to improve services and control costs in Medicaid. And the results have been good. Waiting lists are down, services are up, costs are growing, but at a slower rate than before. On pensions, we have enacted reform and succeeded in devoting considerably more resources to what was a badly underfunded pension system. In 2010, according to the Pew Center, Kansas had the second worst funded pension system in America amongst all the states. Thanks to the reforms undertaken here, done with bipartisan support, our rankings have improved and we're now middle of the pack. Understand, though, that the unfunded liability in KPERS vastly exceeds any issue with our year-to-year budget. It dwarfs every other item on the state balance sheet. All of those truly interested in fiscal prudence should support putting our state retirement system on a sound long-term footing. Now, in the matter of K-12 spending, a majority of the projected shortfall we face is due to increases in K-12 spending since fiscal year 2014. Let me repeat that. A majority of the projected shortfall we face is due to increases in K-12 spending since fiscal year 2014. For decades now, Kansas has struggled under a school finance formula which was designed not to be understood, to frustrate efforts at accountability and efficiency. A formula designed to lock in automatic massive increases in spending unrelated to actual student populations or improved student achievements. A formula which calculated that we've added more than 100,000 new students to the public schools while the actual census has grown by a fraction of that number. An accounting scheme that claims cuts to per-pupil spending even as budget increases dramatically outpace increases in student population. Not surprisingly, that formula has been under litigation for 40 years. Just within the last few weeks, the latest ruling was issued in a suit filed under the previous administration. In the words of that court ruling, quote, "One cannot classify the school financing structure as reliably constitutionally sound." I agree. Friends, it is time for a new school finance formula. Now, that formula should reflect real-world cost and put dollars in the classroom with real students, not in bureaucracy and buildings and gimmicks. That formula should be about improving student achievement and school accountability, not bureaucratic games. Now, my suggestion to you is simple, and I believe necessary. A timeout in the school finance wars. In this two-year budget, the legislature should appropriate money directly to school districts so it can be spent where it is needed most, and that's in the classroom. And at the same time, the legislature should repeal the existing school finance formula and allow itself sufficient time to write a new, modern formula that meets our needs for great 21st century schools. And as we go about that process, it should be accountable to local parents and voters because here the people rule. Accountability. You've heard me say that we must be accountable with our budget and education policy. That accountability should extend to how our elected officials and judiciary are selected. Currently, most elected officials in Kansas are chosen in elections when the fewest voters participate. In general spring elections, see a mere fraction of the participation by voters as fall elections, generally with about 10% of eligible voters participating. Yet that's when most of our elected officials are selected. That does not honor our values of wanting higher voter participation. It's time to move local elections to the fall. It also is time we change the way we pick our Supreme Court. Now, recently, the legislature introduced a greater element of public accountability to judicial selection by reforming the process for selecting appellate court judges. It's time for similar reforms to apply to the Kansas Supreme Court. Currently, we have the least democratic system in America to select Supreme Court justices. The legislature should put before Kansas voters a proposed constitutional amendment for a more democratic selection process, one either based on the federal model or providing for direct elections of Supreme Court justices like we did for the first 100 years of our existence as a state. With the court involved in so many public policy issues, it's time the selection process be more democratic. Now we turn to a subject that directly affects every single Kansan in our future, and that's water. In my first term, I challenged my administration and the citizens of Kansas to develop a long-term vision for the future of the water supply in our state. And you answered that challenge. Now is the time for us to act. Water is an intensely passionate issue where local situations vary enormously. We've not yet accomplished a plan that ensures adequate water supplies throughout our state for the next 50 years. But this will happen before my second term is concluded. When I began my comments this evening, I told you that throughout my career, I've been driven by a belief that we're here to serve others. It's a God-given responsibility, and we as elected officials must accept that and act upon it. We're at our best when we stir within ourselves our better angels, when our hearts are tender to what God is tender to, the poor, the voiceless, the powerless. We should see human life as sacred and recognize its immeasurable worth in every human condition. Whether at the beginning of life or the end of life, Kansas is the most pro-life state in America, and we're not going back. So let us be wise and loving in how we serve the people, particularly those in the greatest need at the time of their greatest need. We need a budget that is adequate and not pernicious. We need social policies that are wise and helpful and which lead people from dependence to independence. We need strong, healthy marriages and families. As I said at the inauguration, big government can never be big enough to replace the family. And we need vision to pass on to our children and their children to come. A vision of Kansas that stands the test of time because it's built on the truth. So as we move forward in this legislative session, let us be wise and compassionate and act in the way that the ancients told us to. And that is that our actions should be, quote, first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Thank you. I wish you all Godspeed in this legislative session, and I look forward to working with you throughout it. And may God continue to grant all of us the grace and the mercy and the truth to carry out our duties. Good night. Guys. Yeah. Thanks, folks. Thank you. Hey, guys. Thanks, folks. Good job. Gentlemen. Hello.
Response.
And the Kansas State of the State speech tonight, and we'll have more later with the State of the State from Nevada with Governor Brian